Thank you very much, Shukriya. Alhamdulillah, الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور ونحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Today I came here with a question for all of you. It's more or less a cliche now, but I'm going to ask this anyway because it's probably one of the most important questions that we will ever come across as humans. And I want you to actually think about it and try to get to an answer, if not to the audience, then at least to yourself. The question is simply, who are you? We come across this question quite a lot in our everyday life, particularly in the context of the introduction, when we ask to introduce ourselves. And the answer to the question usually depends on the context or the place that we are, or who we are talking to, or what we have been doing in the immediate past. Usually we go by starting with our name, and then we talk about sometimes our profession, sometimes the achievements that we have made in the life, where we come from, what our religion is, a lot of things. But the question is, would I not be me if my parents had chosen a different name for me? Or if I had been born in a different place, or if I moved to a different country and changed my nationality, or changed my profession, or if I had selected a different field for my work? The point that I'm trying to make is not that these things are not important. They are of great importance in our everyday life, and they deserve the importance that they get. But the point that I'm trying to make here is they're all external to our actual personality, to the person inside us. They are not the things which are intrinsic part of our personality, but they are the things that we acquire from our environment. Somebody gave us a name, we were born in a particular country, or we moved to one, and we selected a particular field, or probably we were thrown to one. But these are all the things that we acquire from the environment externally. And the question is, so is there a deeper meaning in the life? Is there a more profound something that we can identify ourselves with without looking at what we have done in the life and what we are doing, or what our name and all these philosophically putting accidental properties are? And that is what will remain the focus for the rest of the day. We'll try to answer this question. Islam has addressed this question in a particular manner, and Iqbal has understood that in a particular way. So we are going to focus on the way that Iqbal understood Islam addressed this question. To be more specific, we have decided on a particular topic, khudi, or the selfhood or self, and which most of us know that it is probably the focal point of Iqbal's philosophy, and could say it's the centerpiece of Iqbal's world, mentioned myriad number of times in both prose and poetry done by Iqbal. So what we are going to do is that we're going to stick with this topic and try to lay it out in really simple manner. We'll just focus on the basic notion of what khudi or self or selfhood is and what its immediate applications are. I will just stick to the very first part of just defining what khudi is, basically what Iqbal means when he says khudi. And then we have two very great personalities with us today. We have the honor, and they will focus on specific aspects of khudi and some advanced topics. Having said that, the question that arises, and that some of you might be asking in your minds, is why should we care? What is in it for me? What is in it for you? If there is a personality inside us, there is something inside us, or khudi or selfhood or self, why should we care? When we go about in our daily life, we use all those things which I just call the accidental properties, which are of the great importance. We go by our name and our profession and nationality and opinions. Why should we care if there is another identification at another deeper level inside us? I'll try to answer that using an example. Say you land a new job today. Marvelous job. Suppose you get a job at a company where you always wanted to be. You get a salary that is beyond your imaginations, the highest possible salary in the world. And the facilities are great, co-workers are great. But you're told, your manager takes you to the office, it's very nice, has all the facilities and gizmos and gadgets that you have never seen before, and he asks you, he tells you that, okay, this is your job for the next 3 days only. You're on probation for 3 days, and after 3 days, we are going to evaluate you. If you do good, if you perform well, then we'll even give you a promotion, and you will stay in this job forever, till the time you want. And the career prospects are great. But if you do not perform well, if you're not evaluated at the level where we want you to be, then you'll be thrown out. And then you will not be admitted in this company or any other company in this town. So what do you do then? What will be the first concern that you would have at this statement of your manager? I would personally, if that is me, then I won't really concern about the lunch or the gizmos or gadgets or my office, how good it looks or not. My first concern would be to find out what is going to be evaluated and how. How will my performance be judged after 3 days, because I want to be in that job. And how can I know that? By knowing what my job description is, who I am. Right? So we are back to that question. If I'm a salesperson, then probably it's going to be evaluated by the highest and most sustainable sales that I make, the sales deals that I close. Right? If I do not know who I am in any job, I cannot decide which way to go. I cannot decide what the criteria for success or failure is. Then I'm doomed. So I will probably, the first thing that I would do is look at the job description and see what I am in this company, what my position is. And then if there are any doubts or anything, then of course I can go ahead to people of knowledge or my manager and ask him that, hey, these are the questions that I have and these are the doubts, then can you please help me with those? So this is what we are going to try to find, who we are and what is the purpose that we have in this life. If there is a purpose in the life, if there is a God, then we need to know that. Right? And right now it is a very good time for you to let us know if you want us to also focus on a particular topic or want to include a particular topic in the agenda. We will try to accommodate that as much as possible. And the rest of the program, just so you know, is going to be in Urdu. I have taken special permission to speak in English, and I had to really insist. You're also most welcome to use any language. If you have any questions, you're also most welcome to interrupt me. If you have pressing questions that cannot wait before we go further. Otherwise, we have ample time at the end for the questions and answers. So, back to the question. What does Iqbal mean when he mentions khudi exactly? What is the basic notion that he's referring to? Very often, it is seen that khudi is widely misunderstood for something close to as khuddari, or self-respect, dignity, the quality of being self-sufficient. Right? That is not correct. Just I want to mark that we are not misunderstanding the concept of khudi right from the start. That is, in fact, a very limited concept when put in contrast to the overall ideology and philosophy of khudi. Then many of us also know that khudi is not a new term. It has been in use for centuries, and particularly in the more mystic traditions of different religions in the world and different cultures, it has been detested as a negative thing, as something very negative, because it is associated with things like false pride and the wayward ego and even selfishness. So the purpose in many of the mystic traditions of the world, particularly the pantheistic mysticism, the purpose of the life has been to negate yourself, negate khudi, to kill it in order to be absorbed in the universal soul or a higher reality, just like a drop loses itself when it joins a river or an ocean and lives forever. So I won't really press on a lot of these issues. We are really squeezing for the time. We are quite pressed, so I will try to cut short many things, and I'm relying on your questions. So please feel free to ask any questions if you think something has been left abstract. The khudi, when Iqbal mentions it, it simply means, the very basic notion, it simply means the nucleus of the person inside us, the core of the person inside us. It is very hard to pinpoint and very hard to observe, particularly in the words and the normal narrations. But we all know it when we say I or when we say you. The very thing that we are referring to, that is what khudi constitutes the very core of. So when we say I want to do something, we are not talking about our name or a profession or where we come from. We are not even talking about our body most of the time. Right? Also, say, just for the sake of understanding, if tomorrow I meet an accident and I lose 2 of my legs, I lose half of my body, will anybody say that I'm half the person now? Or will I still be a complete person, a complete individual? So what is that thing that makes us individuals, which is separate from the physical or cognitive abilities? If somebody is not as intelligent as somebody else, we do not say that he's half the individual or lesser an individual than the other one. He might have not developed his personality as much as the other person has done in certain aspects. But the individuality is defined, the person inside us is defined separate from all these accidental properties as well as our physicality and our cognitive abilities. So basically, point number 1 is that khudi, or selfhood, or self, is the essence of our personality and its awareness. I'm leaving it to that, and it will crystallize more and more as we go forward. But then the question that arises is, okay, if that is khudi, fine, that is self, all right, but what makes it so important that Iqbal expresses as the way as it should be, at least, the focal point for the life? Why does then Iqbal go ahead and say, Zindagani hai sadaf katraye naisa hai khudi, wo sadaf kya ke jo katre ko guhar kar na sake? What makes it so important? Why does Quran then say, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ? Do not be like those who forgot Allah, and He made them forget their own selves. And those are the fasiqeen. Why forgetting yourself makes you fasiq? The property of being fasiq is something to go beyond your sheath or your skin in which you were supposed to develop. It's just like if, just imagine in contemporary terms, if there's a fruit that comes out of its peel, then it goes rotten very quickly and it stops developing any further. That is what the basic notion of fasiq means. Why do we stop developing if we forget our souls, if we forget ourselves? So, in order to quest for the answer to this question, I shall digress a bit. Rather than looking at the you and myself, rather than looking at the khudi that we have as humans, I shall first try to look at something that Iqbal refers to as the ultimate ego, or the ultimate self, or khudi mutlaq. And when Iqbal does that, he is referring to God. In many traditions of the world, and including the parts of the Sufi tradition in Islam, particularly the Wahdatul Wujudi discipline in the Sufism, God is seen as a pervasive cosmic reality, as kind of an energy. I do not want to really go into the technicalities, so I will put it in more or less rough terms. So God is thought of as an energy that kind of penetrates the whole universe. God is everywhere, literally. And it's not one individual that we can look at separate from the rest of the universe. But God is present everywhere, and even in some traditions, God is the only presence, God is the only existence in the world, and the rest is the illusion. That is very, very contrary to Iqbal's view of God, his conception of God. We usually, some of the at least, subscribers to this first theory about God, the conception of God, they usually go for, if they are referring to Quran, then they usually go for the verses like Allah nur samawati wal earth, that God is the light of the earth and the heavens and the earth. And that is where they also get their inspiration from. Iqbal also, interestingly, looks at the same verse times. And he says that, no, read it through. Let us see what this verse exactly says. And he interprets that in a different way. And I'm reading one of such verses from Surah An-Nur, chapter 24, verse 35. God is the light of the heavens and of the earth. Example of his light is of a niche in which is a lamp. The lamp encased in a glass, the glass as it were a star. For Iqbal, these verses, and his own conception as well, lead him to the conclusion that God is an individual, just like you and I. He's also an individual, but with the difference that he's perfect in his attributes. His attributes are infinite in their intensity as well. And he has the infinite balance and proportion and harmony in those attributes. He has infinite number of possibilities in itself. So, but after all that, Iqbal views God as only an individual, and this verse kind of advocates the same. It talks about a niche. It talks about Allah being nur samawati wal earth, being the light of the heavens and of the earth, but then it separates him away, separates the origin of the light away in a niche, in a lamp, encased in a glass, very protected, very well defined, away from the rest of the universe, but affecting the rest of the universe with its energy, with its light. That is the view that Iqbal has. When we look at Surah Al-Ikhlas, that is the definition of God's individuality. How does it start? Qul huwallahu ahad. It starts with a proper name for God. A proper name just like we have. It's not a qualitative property. It's a personal name. It's Qul huwallahu ahad. Then it's talk about his oneness, that he is God. His name is Allah. He's one. And then it goes further, defining and elaborating the individuality of God. Then it says, Allahu Samad, that his individuality is such that it does not rely on anything external to it. It's completely self-sufficient, completely self-contained. It does not rely on anything outside it. That is the extreme definition of individuality. We are individuals, but we still depend on each other. Then it goes much further. Then it says something very important. Then it says, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. That individuality is such that it does not come from anything. It's not derived from anything. It has its own origin. It does not have another origin external to it. So if God was not born of anything. He is such an exclusive, self-sufficient, self-contained center that it was not derived from anything external to it. And then, even more important thing, Walam yulad, nobody is born of God. He does not beget anything. Why is that important? What is birth after all? When we talk about birth, when we talk about pedaish, it just means that a part of me, a self from me, is separated, and then it develops in a conducive environment, and it develops into another one like me, of the same kind. That is what God cannot be. He is such a singularity, a unique singularity, that it cannot be divided. We cannot take something away from God. And we cannot make something just of the same kind outside him, even by taking his own part. God cannot be divided. It's the singularity that is perfect, self-contained, and cannot be divided. So that is the individuality of God. I'll just move forward pretty quickly from some of the points that I wanted to discuss. Our view of, or conception of God is usually very personal and very relative. When we talk about God, we usually do not talk about the absolute God as He is, but we talk about the way that we view Him, that we conceive Him, that we perceive God. And we can see that God for different cultures is usually different. Even in the same culture, different classes, poor and rich, they have different conceptions of God. Their attitude and behavior towards God is different. Even the same person, when I'm sick and when I'm not, when I'm doing good and when I'm not, my perception of God is different, but God is not. He has an absoluteness about Him. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. You won't see the ways of God changing. So that is where revelation comes to help. And revelations, they tell us what the absolute attributes of God are. Who He is, how does He act, and His actions, His ways, they do not change. To the same actions, He has the same reaction. And in His personality, the attributes that He has, they are in the perfect, infinitely perfect harmony, infinitely perfect proportion and balance, even though some of the attributes might appear to us as contradictory in nature, at discord, like He's Rahman and Rahim, and He's at the same time Qahar and Jabbar, and even so Intiqam. So that does not collide, those properties do not collide in the personality of God. I want to, in particular, bring your attention to two of the characteristics and traits of God, two of His attributes. And these are the attributes that actually have been the biggest discriminators between God and the rest of the universe, between the Creator and the created. There are infinite number of attributes that separate God from the rest of the universe, but these two are quite important for our topic. So one is His infinite independence, His free will. He is extremely authoritative and independent, can do whatever He wants, and He's not controlled by any internal or external qualities. He does what He wants, and He has control over what He wants. So He's Ghani, He's Samad, He's Qadir, He's Malik, He's all those things that Quran tells us. Second property that God has, which has been a great discriminator, is His creativity. He created all of these things, and His creations are perfect to their function, to their purpose. And a third thing, which is another attribute that I want to bring up, is that even though He can do anything, and even though He can create anything that He wants, in any way that He wants, He does not. There is a method to the way that He does things. He has principles that He follows. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. Sunnatullah, His ways do not change. They remain the same. He does the same things, the same way. He has the highest definition of the principles, the highest values that He has ordained unto Himself in the words of Quran. One expression, for example, in Quran is كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. God is talking about Himself, that I have ordained on myself the act of Rahmah. It's a different discussion what the act of Rahmah is. I don't want to go into that. But that is the way He acts. He does not exploit His independence and free will. So far, what we have seen is just the basic notion of khudi. When we talk about khudi, we are talking about the individual that we are, the core of the personality. And then we looked at some attributes of God. That for Iqbal, God is also an individual with infinite possibilities and attributes, with the highest possible harmony and proportion. And then we looked at three attributes of God. His creativity, His independence, and that despite these two things, He acts with a method which does not change. And even His words do not change. لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِكَلِمَاتِ اللَّهِ, as Quran says. So these qualities, particularly the creativity, that is the point that I wanted to lead to. Takhliq, creativity, and independence. These were unique to God, according to the knowledge that we have, at least. These were unique to the God only, and no other creature shared these attributes until he created humans. So, the creation of humans was the most magnificent and glorious event known to us in the course of evolution. It was something that changed everything. It changed the course of evolution. It was a revolution within the course of evolution. I shall elaborate that further. When we look at animals, I have this conviction that animals are merely machines with flesh and bones. They do not have much in the name of self-consciousness or self-awareness or free will. And science also agrees with that to a great deal. Let's look at some examples, some interesting ones. The lions, for example, they have been chasing other animals for ages, for centuries, for as long as we know, as long as we can recall. And other animals, like deers, for example, they have always been trying to seek refuge. They have been running away from the lions to save their life. There was no day when they thought that, hey, it's been enough now, let us gather one day and kick him out of the jungle. No matter how many in number, no matter how strong, they never thought that. Lion, on the other hand, he did not think that, hey, I have been running after that poor thing for a long time. Now enough is enough. Let us invent something. Why not catapult? Why not throw something at the deer instead of running after him? It's not good. So creativity, not at all. Centuries go and pass by. The animals or the rest of the creatures, they do not create anything. And similarly, in terms of free will, they even have their breeding seasons. They do not change their food habits. So, Quran puts it in the words, reading from Surah Al-Nahl. وَلِلَّهِ يَسْجُدُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ دَابَّةٍ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ يَخَافُونَ رَبَّهُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. And to Allah make obeisance all that is in the heavens and on the earth, among animals and angels. And they do not defy His laws. They revere their sustainer above them and do what they are commanded. So that is the witness that Quran bears on that. That animals and angels, these are the creatures of command. In philosophy, you can say that they are very tightly bound to the cause and effect. They are very tightly bound to what we call in philosophy incompatibilistic determinism. But about humans, when Quran talks about us, He says things like وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. And say that the truth is from your Rabb, from your sustainer, and whosoever wants, accept it, and whosoever wants, deny. We have that freedom. And that was the very point on which the angels actually objected. I will come to that point later, why, if we have time to explain that. But first I want your attention to the very interesting account of human creation as mentioned in Quran. There's something very, very interesting that I want you to really look at and analyze. Surah Al-Sajdah, chapter 32, verses 7 to 9. He began the creation of human with clay and then used the method of reproduction to further his generation. Then he fashioned him in due proportion, that is, along the course of evolution. And then, this is the revolutionary point, he breathed into him his spirit. And then everything changes suddenly. Then the next verse says, then gave you the faculties of hearing and sight and feeling. Now something very interesting happened here. In the first two verses, Quran was talking about humans in a third person narrative. We're talking about saying that we created a human, we fashioned him, then we gave him the spirit, we breathed into him the spirit. And then suddenly the narration changes. Then it says, then we gave you the hearing and the sight and the feelings. So that act of being breathed into by the Spirit, that act made us worthy of being addressed to. that made us conscious and aware. Now we suddenly know when somebody is speaking. We can think, we can analyze things. That act of spirit is what gave us khudi and ourself. And that lies at the core of our khudi. And what is the origin of that self? That is another very important point. Quran says, and it is this verse is at multiple places. I'm reading from Surah As-Swad, verse 32. فَإِذَا صَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. This is the account when God created the human, then asked Malaika to prostrate to him, fall down prostrating to him. So the way that Quran puts it is that when I fashion him and when I infuse into him, breathe into him from my spirit, then fall down prostrating to him. That is extremely important. So we cannot know the entire notion of what ruh is in its essence, in its mahiyat, but there are some perspectives that we can get, and this is one of those. Recall Allah's attributes that we discussed a bit earlier, His creativity and His free will. And then we said that these were unique to God only. But then what happened is that He infused in us from His Spirit. That is what gave us consciousness, awareness. That is what gave us these attributes and many more. That is what made us creative. The human creativity is evident everywhere. I do not even have to speak about that. That gave us free will, the kind of free will that Quran mentioned, that here's the truth, pick it or leave it. We have the path and we can choose where we want to go. So, in addition to these things, we have a lot of other attributes. We can be, the difference is that all our attributes are within a very small sphere of bashariyat, of humanness. We cannot go beyond that. They are also sampled out and adopted to this physical world. So it is hard to really put them side by side in this physical world to those of Allah, and we make a lot of mistakes when trying to do that. But we can be Rahman, we can be Rahim, we can be Qahar and Jabbar and Zu Intiqam as well. We can be all those things. There are many things that we cannot be, of course, because we are limited, extremely limited. This is, in Iqbal's verse, this is called khudi muqayyad. So khudi is limited and relative as well. That is the Allah's attributes and the spirit and the ruh that we got. That is what defines the very core of our khudi. And that is what also defines its purpose. Leading from this line of argument, then the purpose of life, because as I mentioned that Malaika objected to the creation of human, and the reason was that human got the free will and creativity. These are great forces, but we did not have that harmony and that proportion in our personality. We did not know how to use those attributes in the right way, in the balanced way, as God did. And that was their objection, that you are atajalu fiha man yufsidu fiha, you're creating somebody who will cause disturbance and fasad in earth. Because they have all these forces, but they do not know how to use them. So, the purpose of life, in terms of khudi ki namu, as we say, the development and edification of khudi, that is to strike a balance in these attributes, to strike a harmony and proportion in these attributes, to use them the way that they should be used. But then, the next question is, how do we know what is the right way to use them? What is the criteria that we have? Is there a model? Is there an ideal that we can follow? And the ideal was the individual that had these attributes proportioned in the infinitely good way. God. God is our ideal. We share some of God's attributes, very few of those, but we do share them. So we have to strike the balance exactly in the same way. There is a verse in Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدُوا. Here Allah is addressing Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and says that if these people bring the faith as you did, then they're on the right path. Then they have got the guide. They are rightly guided. And then the next verse, an important verse, Sibghat Allah, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنَ مِنَ اللَّهِ سِبْغَةً. The colors, the shades of Allah. And who has the colors better than him? So this is more like an Arabic idiom, so it's hard to understand it in English. In order we would say that Allah ke rang mein range jana is the purpose of the life. And that is the way that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ brought faith in Allah. So Allah is the ideal, God is the ideal, and Prophet Muhammad, at least for the Muslims, is the model to achieve that ideal. And there's also a tradition that I will just quote. I haven't verified it, so with that disclaimer, it is quoted a lot. تَخَلَّقُ بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ. That says that form your attributes after, form your morals and your ethics after the ethics and morals and attributes and personality of Allah. So it's saying the same thing, pretty much. And when we reach that stage, when we are at that step, that we have aligned ourselves with Allah, that is when we say al-wala wal-bara, their love and their hatred is for the sake of Allah alone. So that is that stage. That is the stage of Malaya. And best model, as I said, is the personality of Prophet Muhammad for us. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. It's another verse that talks about that. So far, I will just do a quick recap and finish after one or 2 points. A quick recap. Number one, khudi is, or self or selfhood, is the core, the essence inside us. That is the essence of our personalities, something that we refer to when we say I, which is separate from the body or the accidental properties that we have acquired from the external environment. Then number two, Allah is an individual with infinitely perfect khudi, infinitely perfect self. And our khudis and its abilities, they are a result of Ruhullah, the spirit from Allah that was given to us. We are special and different from the rest of the creatures in the sense that we share those attributes with Allah, and the purpose of the life is to strike a balance, strike a harmony, strike a proportion between those attributes, apparently contradictory attributes. We touch extremes very quickly. We are extremely morose and extremely elated. We are extremely angry and extremely polite. We do all those things in our lives, sometimes in the same day, sometimes in the same breath. We have to find the balance, and the model for that, the ideal for that is Allah. So the purpose of the life is self-affirmation, in Iqbal's words, not self-negation. The mystic way is to avoid the self that can lead you to anger and to negative emotions. Iqbal's way is to develop this because it is such a nice force, it's such a great force. That is what defines what we are and who we are. That is a blessing from Allah that we should not really negate. So I will just finish now with some last points. When we align ourselves with Allah that way, when we strike the same kind of balance with Allah, it has a very, very different feeling. It's not the same feeling as just obeying because of anything, because of fear or because we were told so. It gives us a feeling of affinity and affiliation, a direct affiliation. Now we share something with a very higher personality. Aligning thus to Allah also allows us to align to the laws of nature, the forces of the universe. Then what we do, it becomes a revolution instead of an evolution. We have seen some of those revolutions, very few of those in the history. When we reach that point, that allows us in a way to contribute to the act of creativity of Allah, the act of creation and the act of perfection. We become partners, you can say, in His act of rububiyyat in this universe. Quran says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu in tansurullaha yansurkum. Mu'minun, if you help Allah, Allah will help you. That is what helping Allah is. And when we reach that point, then comes the stage when Quran says, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. This is about the event when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he threw this palmful of, that is what is reported at least, threw of dust towards the enemies during Ghazwa Badr, during the battle of Badr. And this verse says that, O Prophet, what you threw when you threw was not who you were throwing that, it was Allah. That is the closeness, the kind of closeness that you have with Allah when you reach that stage. And this is the next step in Tawheed as well. This is, so the first part of Tawheed, the first step was oneness of Allah. The next step is being, in a way, virtually, I must emphasize that, virtually being one with Allah. And that is when Iqbal says, Khudi says, talisme rangubu ko tod sakte hain, yahi tawheed thi jisko na tu samjha na main samjha. That is the link between Khudi and Tawheed. So, and then when it happens so that more than one individual, when a society or a group, when they come in alignment with Allah, they also naturally come in alignment with themselves. Then they make this unique society, a society of unique individuals who are in, who have the same ideals, same objectives, same purposes, and universe, the forces of the universe, they just bow to them. So that is in a way start of Khudi. There's another entirely different concept that we won't really indulge in today. How Khudi functions in a society rather than in an individual. So I had a lot more to say, which I will not right now. Iqbal does not only explain the fundamental notion of Khudi and its immediate applications, but also goes one step further and, if you like, also defines the suluk of his metaphysics, the stages of developing this Khudi to its final form in this life, and the conditions which provide the conducive environment and the conducive situation for that development to happen. They are very, very interesting. Some of those will be emphasized by the great personalities that we have today with us. If the rest is, we are relying on your questions, and we will talk about that if we have some time left at the end, probably. But I will just count them without saying anything about them. The easiest way to look at that is to look at the conditions and the steps differently. The conditions for the development of Khudi, they are the goals and ambitions, struggle and movement for the noble goals and ambitions, love and faith as the driving forces. And many of these things that I'm saying, they are not used in the usual meaning, in the usual context. Love, for example, is not the usual definition of love. It is a very specialized thought, of very generic, very large ideology of love. But we will talk about that. In fact, Ghulam Sabir Sahib, he will have the whole talk on focused on that. And action, that is extremely important. And then Faqr, Hurriyat and Jurrat. These are the conditions for the development of Khudi, some of the conditions. And then the stages include the adhering to the principles and laws. Which principles and which laws, we can talk about that later. Self-control, the second stage. And the third stage is the vicegerency of Allah. Niyabat ilahi, khilafat fil earth. That is Allah's khilafat, and being Allah's vicegerent in earth. A lot to say more, but I will stop here. And if you have any questions, lay those on me. Please go ahead.
जज़ाकल्लाह माशाअल्लाह। सवाल जवाब का हम सेशन रख रहे हैं, लेकिन वक्त की बहुत किल्लत है हमारे पास, इसलिए आपसे दरख्वास्त है कि अपना सवाल मुख्तसर लेकिन जामे कीजिए, और वो दूसरों की दिलचस्पी के लिए हो। तो तकरीर करने की यहाँ गुंजाइश नहीं है, बराए मेहरबानी हमारी मजबूरियों को समझिए, लेकिन हमें बहुत खुशी होगी आप जितने अच्छे और जितने ज़्यादा सवालात करेंगे। तो अब सवालात का हिस्सा शुरू होता है।
Thank you, Sarosh, for a very enlightened lecture. Listening to you, I understood that khudi is self-affirmation and not negation. This is an Islamic perspective, a concept. Now, 23% of the world population is Muslim, only 23%. So, I have two small questions, a concrete question. Does it mean that this whole development of khudi is only Islamic,